Hello everyone and welcome to the Deep Blue Renegade podcast. My name is Molly, also known as the Deep Blue Renegade, and I'd like to welcome you guys to episode 405. Today is Saturday, March 26, 2022, and I'm glad you could join me today. It appears that both of the days are napping, so we'll see if I can record this uninterrupted. Who knows? I'll look unclear. There was a little cry. But they're both in the same room, so it seems plausible. And I've already had all my coffee for the day, and now I am drinking the strawberry green tea. Looks like I have like one more of that, and that'll all be gone. Would it be? That's the life we're living here. Figuring out how to drink up the tea that has been bought in the past. Short answer, 4 ounces is much more reasonable amount of tea than other quantities. I have silly things like a pound of Thai tea. It's like I wanted Thai tea, but I didn't need a pound. But it'll be okay. So, and there is quite an assortment of things around me, which is exciting. But even despite this, I wasn't entirely prepared, so oh well. Because I'm looking like straight back and be like, oh, I was gonna bring that yarn over. Right? Whatever. It's not like it's the end of the world. So, in very exciting news, I have completed the toner sweater. So, this is an Elizabeth Daughtry pattern that I ended up finding because I was looking to use my 1,500 yards of handspun in a project that would be normally I have a sweater and then I buy the yarn. In this case, I had the yarn and I needed to find a sweater that met those specifications. And so this resulted in me adding a bunch of sweaters to my queue. We'll get back to that. In order to figure out what in the world to make exactly. And it'd be the case where like pattern is absolutely impeccable, every instruction, no matter how strange, is given because it is the best possible way in order to execute whatever thing you're doing. And really the only thing that I ended up changing about the pattern was, it had a recommended number of repeats for length, but I think because I was using a different material, I needed more repeats in order to achieve that length. So, unfortunately, I have not yet blocked the sweater, but pretty much what ended up happening was, let's see, can we even see? That one's my child. The children next door are playing, so I'd be like, oh, wait a second. So you can see sort of the red marker there, so that was where I was last week. So I really was extremely close to the finish on this. So I knit the 44-inch size because that would give me, or 43 1/4, because that was going to give me close to the recommended ease when we're talking upper bust. I don't know if it's negative ease or 0 ease on my bust right now. Sort of depends on the time of day. At the moment. And I actually do anticipate that this is going to relax a little bit when I block it. And not like I would wear it under a black t-shirt like this, but it'd be the case where there is some ease and looseness in the armpit area, but you do have the drop going on. There we go, get that situated somewhere sensible. So, like mid-hip length, you can see that it's subtly stripy, but it's not like stripy. And when you get really close to it, you can see that this is hand-spun yarn. What would it be? And has all of the interesting subtleness that hand-spun yarn has. So this is a blend of alpaca, merino, pulworth, and silk. I had a 6-ounce braid of the alpaca merino, 4-ounce braid of the pulworth silk. Blended this on, the drum carder. Made bats, spun the bats, made bats, pulled them off, I believe, or did them off the drum carder. Pretty sure I did that. As 10 1-ounce bats, spun those together, applied those together, and was like, oh crap, I have enough yarn, I can knit a sweater with my 10-ounce sample. So, and this was to try out something I was planning on doing with my Romney fleece here in my plastic garbage bag. But at this point, would it be based on how interrupted I end up being? Dying is a little bit too aggressive for me at this point, so it'll be a little bit before I do that. Maybe I'll knit a different thing with my other yarn that was constructed in a similar way. So, thought process being making a yarn that has complicated color, that is super blended, because you run something through the drum carder enough times and it will average the color. So I still wanted some variation, but not have it look like I took a braid and spun it. Because that would, I think, would be you're typically have in your mind for hand spun sweater or solid colors or that sort of thing. So this was a color exercise, basically. And I will happily knit a Blue Bee pattern again, Blue Bee Studio pattern again. Impeccable. Honestly, a little bit challenging for someone who has knit many sweaters to just follow the pattern because it's right. Except for the things that you can change, right? Like, what would it be? Like, make modifications in order to fit your body. But every technical instruction in that pattern was on point. So, would it be sort of the case where you're making your mind buzz a little bit with respect to how could I incorporate elements of this pattern into other ones? You know what I mean? So all of my ends are woven in. What would it be? I'd probably wear this with a tank top, but honestly, it's not too crazy with a t-shirt. I ended up doing about twice as much ribbing on the bottom as I did for the sleeves and the neckband, and mostly that was just because I wanted a little bit more ribbing than this. Good size opening, really nice fit. And the dealio here is, I think what would have gone down is this size fits, looks great. I also think the next size up would have also fit and looked great, and I probably had enough yarn in order to knit that next size. And if I knit the next size up in the pattern, which I think was like a 48 finish measurement, that would have more closely matched my weekender, because my weekender is 48, and that was the size that I intended to knit. Versus this guy, which I think is 43 3/4. Effectively, it was a 44-inch sweater. So that means that is probably 0 ease on the bust, and then plus 8 inches of ease in the shoulder. So what would it be? But we'll see how it ends up blocking out. It is mostly wool. What would it be? Like if you actually do sort of the breakdowns, it is mostly wool. And actually, or would it be the case where the largest fiber quantity is actually the Polworth, then equal amounts of merino and coret, and then a little bit of silk on the end. So this is super warm, but today that's fine. So this, because the alpaca makes it really warm. So even though this is a very light yarn and a very light sweater, it's still going to be cozy and snuggly and that sort of thing. So that's lovely. Will it wear well? Who knows? It definitely has some halo to it in areas that have been out and working a little bit more. So I didn't spin this yarn intending to make a sweater. So it would have been the case where maybe I would have wanted a more tight ply, or maybe I should have done 3-ply or something like that, if I wanted it to be like a really good yarn for sweatering, but that's fine. It was primarily an experiment in color, and I just needed to knit the big swath of fabric to prove my theory was correct. That I could, like, there is some stripiness. And the pattern itself has a texture which ends up bringing out maybe some of that stripiness as well, but it's not like, what would it be? It would be, it's not as obvious a stripiness as spinning hand-dyed top at the end of the day. So I think I've validated my theory, which is very exciting. Because what I would like to do is, for some reason, my vision for the Romney lamb sweater is like beautiful sunny day. And I now know based on that I want to have mostly blue and white. It's me. And no more than 10% of yellow and orange. Would it be just to add a little bit of dimension and fun to the color? And it might just be that that's 10% total of complement yellow and orange. Not 100% sure. So, yeah, it is very exciting. And I've been working on this since October 29th, not monogamously. There have been baby hats, maybe a baby blanket. I don't know, I'd have to check my notes. At least one baby sweater that superseded this guy. But this was what I brought with me to the hospital because it was my only project on the needles. So our welcome to the world, happy parents picture also has a sweater lying in the bottom of the frame. Probably very similar to the blood red shawl that I was working on my wedding day. It was just like, this is a part of the scenery. There's going to be some knitting project nearby. So this was my work in progress when I had Mr. Daniel. So that also makes it special too. So yeah, I ended up winding the ball just to make it easier to reskein, and I'll check how much yardage I have left over. Last I weighed it, there was 50 grams left, but then I did the ribbing. So there isn't a whole lot of leftover. I'm gonna guess it's probably 40 grams left over, so not too crazy there. This is yarn unlike any of my other handspun yarn, so it'll probably be challenging yarn to end up using up, but it'll just end up in my baggie of handspun leftovers and we'll figure something out for it eventually. This is sort of the magnitude of stuff where, what would it be? Like, this amount of yarn is good for throwing into like the yoke of a colorwork sweater and would probably be really pretty for that sort of purpose. Would it be, or that's where my mind goes now with these sort of ounce to 2 ounce leftovers. So this one's probably about 1.5 ounces. So yeah, pretty pleased with this one. Would it be? But probably not going to get a ton of wear right now because this season of my life is getting covered and spit up, and I count it as a good day if, would it be, it's like not in my hair. It's gonna be on my shoulders somewhere, so my pullovers have not been getting as much love recently, because I do not want to also wash them of the goo. But whatever, it shouldn't be too crazy. Yeah. And then whatever else is coming out of me too. So, finished sweater. So it'll be interesting to see how much dimensions change with blocking, but I don't know whether or not we can get you a good, yeah, the color is warmer than it's showing up on the screen. It is a warmer redder purple color. This looks pretty blue, but my webcam doesn't like purple. So I am gathering all of the things I need to put together a series of hand washing, and so sweater will be the first thing. Then a swatch once I actually make it. Because I'm going to work on a project where the color turns out true. So I have my little tower of DK yarn. Would it be? And then after I do my swatch, then for some ridiculous reason, my nursing bras are hand wash only. So I have actually been putting together fairly frequent hand washing trains because would it be put together the sink of no rinse wool wash, and then the nursing bra is the last thing to go through. Well, actually, no, the socks are the last one. But yeah, no, so quite the litany of things to wash when the time comes. But, what would it be? And then this is also hilarious, because what would it be? So this is Madeline Tosh Twisty K. In the deep color, obviously very much so. It is a teal leaning navy, lots of black, and you can see like the little ends of it, because that's where it was actually tied. Would it be? So I'll have to snip a bunch of ends, but holy cow, there were a lot of ties on these. But got this all wound. And then, I don't know if it was actually like in the middle of winding. We'll just have like yarn enticingly slightly off camera. I don't know if it was in the middle of the winding where it's like I was planning on doing the Swan-Hilled sweater. I should verify that I have enough yarn. And it was the case where the pattern that I had originally selected was a Deary, and that was what I was thinking of when I bought the yarn. And I think it was the case where there were 5 skeins, and I was trying to figure out if 5 skeins would actually get me a sweater at the time. But not a heavily cabled one. And then I did like a quick Ravelry search, but there's a lot of these ones in the wild, because I don't know if this was a base that wasn't necessarily regularly available online, but was available in their brick and mortar store. So when they had a brick and mortar store in 2015, so I did that sanity check. I was like, oh, maybe I could get some more. But the pattern description of Ravelry was not detailed enough for me to figure out if I would need 2 more or 3 more in order to make it happen. And then, like, Madeline Tosh sits sort of on that interface between, what would it be, when you have your, like, small-scale indie dyer and your full-on commercial yarn. So it'd be the case where Madeline Tosh's sort of yarn, which has that hand-dyed quality to it, but it'd be the case where there were multiple people who were doing the hand dyeing. So it still had the variations, so you still needed to match skeins and alternate skeins and all of that fun stuff, as you do. So it'd be the case where it has some of the qualities, because it'd be the case where tons of variety, tons of stock, relatively easy to get a hold of, but then also like a handmade product and charged accordingly for it, if that makes sense. At this point, like, the original dyers of Madeline Tosh aren't even a part of the company. They've sold the Jimmy Paints wool. They have whatever people following the recipes, that sort of thing. So what would it be? Like, it's the yarn that I have. I'm planning on using it. I'm probably not gonna end up getting more. But what would it be? That's sort of the story there. And what I ended up doing was just sort of like throwing up a poll being like a Deary or water bearer, and what ended up happening was it was overwhelmingly water bearer. And so water bearer is one of the patterns I found when I was looking for a pattern to knit my purple hand spun with. And I was thinking, okay, maybe if I hold it double, but then that only gives me a crop thing, and it's open from cardigan, I really like pullovers. But now I'm in the season of my life where cardigans are awesome. Throw a cardigan on before I leave the house with a baby strapped to me. It's like, okay, I'm in the season of cardigans in my life. And the other festive thing is that the water bear actually involves brioche. So that is a Jacqueline Cieslak pattern. She actually recently moved to the Bay Area, so that's sort of exciting. Now she's a local designer. She wasn't local when she made this one though. So it seems like a fitting sort of combination. And based on the yarn that I have, I can actually make the full length version of it for me. So I think that will be fun. Should be exciting. It'd be the case where, and the crucial thing that she had mentioned sort of in the notes for the pattern was select the size that fits your upper bust and get that right. So I'm reasonably hopeful that this is going to be an open front cardigan that has the fit that stays on you, because sometimes you can get into the danger zone where if it's or would it be, there are definitely open front cardigans that out there that don't stay on. So yeah, but I haven't started swatching yet. What would it be? It sounds like there's some I-cord going on. But would it be? It'd be the case where I finished the donor, and then I needed to leave the house with a child strapped to me, and it was easier to grab the socks and start unraveling them than it was to wind yarn with a child strapped on me. We'd already strapped on. So it turned out, or would it be the case where I've had the socks to fix around for quite some time. So it'd be the case like, you know what, we're gonna make the socks better and it'll be fine. And that I can hold off on the new shiny cast on until the socks are in a good place. And honestly, the outlook is unclear. So so some point soon I'm gonna swatch, and then I'm gonna watch a bunch of stuff, including my swatch, and I can begin pattern fun. But in the meantime, what's the placeholder until I actually pull out my needles, which are really like within reach right here, is working on the sock. And actually, it's been very engaging and fun to work on the sock. It's been a very pleasant project, but also just full of shenanigans. So the skew sock is notorious because for people with high insteps, like myself, or at the very least, my ankle is sort of high up there on my foot. So would it be? It'd be the case where I really dislike knitting toe-up socks because row gauge matters, and I need to have more gusset than what is typically called for in like in the vanilla sock pattern. And I've been bitten enough times where it's just like, you know what, screw it. The way I knit, the way I don't care about my row gauge top down is much better for me. In terms of like knitting philosophy, and then it just works. Or would it be any extra that I add gets swept under the rug in an appropriate way, and it doesn't matter. Basically. But what would it be? But the skew sock is pretty cool. The skew sock does some really fun things with variegated and self-striping, and even hand-spun yarn. No point knitting it in a solid. None. No point knitting this pattern in a solid. But it does really cool things with the colors, and it's a very engaging knit. There's lots of things going on, lots of changes to what you're doing, so it sort of has slightly more steps, slightly more milestones in a sock, which I find to be pleasant. But because it isn't, or would it be the case where sort of assuming like low instep people, but 2 weeks after the pattern was released on Knitty, the designer put together a blog post of here are hacks to make it fit you better. If you have certain things, like you need a bigger leg, or you need a higher instep, or that sort of thing. And so that was my first try, was, okay, I'm going to go back to the point, add instep increases early on, so that then there'll be more room for my foot to get in there. And if it's roomier there, things will be well. But what it'd be the case where rip back the sock on a walk, get back home, get it back on the needles, read the blog, understand what it is I need to do, which is to add 6 stitches before I start sort of the heel gusset-like area. I get to the point where I'm actually unbiasing it on the leg of the sock, and I pull out my original sock here, and I hold it up to this sock, and it was like, oh no, my reknit sock is smaller than the sock that is too small and does not fit. So I pull out, so whatever, I think at some point the next day I was like, okay, I measure my gauge, and my gauge had changed. So I knit the pattern unchanged, so the 72 stitch version of it, because I had 8 stitches per inch, and I was knitting the new one at 9. I don't know why it changed, or if it was thinner, and maybe the sock has always been worse because maybe the yarn was a little thinner and knit up a little thinner. I don't know. But at the end of the day, 72 stitch biased sock with 9 stitches per inch wasn't going to work because I knit an unbiased sock, 72 stitches, 9 stitches per inch. Like, so right there, that is a big problem. It was like, oh, so I had to think. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to knit the bigger version of the sock. And I have, back in 2017, I knit a pair of skews, and I knew I wanted the tighter gauge. And so what I ended up doing was I figured out the numbers and wrote them down in my notes for how do I make an 80 stitch skew instead of a 72 stitch skew. I think I ended up doing that for like the Stockinette Zombies skew knit along. So really liked how those fit. I didn't do any special thing with it. So I did not use the variation where you have the instep increases. But now I have concluded that I was going to knit the 80 stitch sock and the instep changes. There was, like that little bit of pulling, that subtle thing in the fabric where you can tell, okay, this bias fabric is a little bit stretched and that's probably not ideal. So it was like, if I'm gonna have to rip back to the toe, I might as well also incorporate that change too. So I have the high instep modification in addition to the 80 stitch sock, hopefully in order to make a well-fitting sock for my feet. And I was up too late, too late last night, trying to get to the point where I could actually like see, did this actually work? But I am not quite to the heel turn at this point. I can definitely tell that I have used more yarn in the knitting of this guy because I think, or would it be? It'd be the case where, like, yeah, I have not used as, I am much further along in my little ball than before. But that's not a bad thing. That's actually that's an expected thing at this point. And I do have more yarn. I do have leftovers from this, so that's not going to be a big deal. But it may be the case where I end up needing to do a little bit of tandem knitting. Once I finally do get this far enough along where I can check and make sure that I'm satisfied. Like, trying to figure out if this is, yeah, I don't think this is actually a row I'm supposed to increase on. What would it be? Not quite there yet. So, I really want to find out if I've succeeded, but I'm still like a couple rows away, and it's getting like the sock is quite large at this point. Right before you end up, like it's very similar. Say for example, it would be very similar. Say for example, when you're at the part of the sock where you have like you have all your instep stitches, you have picked up all of the stitches around the heel flap, and you're ready to begin gusset decreases. And that's maybe somewhat akin to where we are right now, except this case we have like a diagonal on of the leg, all of the bulk of the heel area, and then all the way back to sort of like the side of the foot at this point. So this is pretty close to as big as the sock's going to get, so it's a little cramped on the 9-inch circulars. It would be a little bit, it would be even worse if I was on double points. I have knit this pattern on double points, even though like the pattern like explicitly says we recommend you don't. But I'm contrary, so it's okay. But yeah. So it's definitely to its most ungainly point. But then I will be able to whatever, do the little graft once I get to the number of stitches I need, which I'm close, so close, but not quite there. And then I can begin working entirely on the leg with a much more reasonable amount of stitches and go from there. And I think it is going to be the case where I'll have to decide if I need it or not. But I think it's going to end up working out where I'm going to have like a little bit more stitches on the leg than the foot. We'll see. We'll see if I want to keep it that way. Just sort of depends on where I'm at. But I really want to know how it turned out. And I can't find out quite yet. So, but like, what would it be? I think this is going to mean that I incorporate a little bit more of the blue in here, because this particular one had a pretty long stretch of warm colors in the progression. But that should be fine. It'll be fun. And then what's going to end up happening is when I knit the socks, I worked one sock from like the inside ball, I worked the other sock from the outside of the ball, so I should be able to actually pick up the colors right where I left them, or pretty darn close to that, so it will actually be a seamless color transition if I do need to use more yarn. And I don't think I want to go so far as to like take my remaining experimental yarn, split it exactly in half, and go from there. But that could be a valid option. Like I'm not so sure about that. And then for the final icing on the top of the cake, if I really do run out of that yarn, is I do have some chain plied leftovers, basically just sort of the conventional yarn itself, which when we're thinking about like the high wear parts of the sock, like that'll be the cuff. It's not going to be a big deal if that is the yarn that ends up getting used in order to knit a little ribbing on it. So everything's 3-ply. It's just that what I'm working with right now is opposing ply 3-ply. So 2 singles were spun S, 1 was spun Z, and then they were all held together plied Z. So it's a very lumpy, bumpy, energetic, sort of crazy yarn. And I didn't read the directions before I plied, so what would it be? it is a valid construction, but it wasn't what I intended. And then I did end up going back and spinning with a different braid of fiber to S1Z, and then I applied Z, and then I applied, or would it be the case where I made a little bit more of a balanced yarn by applying it twice instead of applying it once. And those socks have been holding up fairly well. They have been pretty regularly in the rotation, so there's like a little bit of fuzz on them, but it'll be interesting to see how they end up holding up, and if this type of construction works better for sock yarn, then I keep doing that. But I needed to sort of get that head-to-head comparison between whatever these two different ways of applying yarn to construct sock yarn. Both of them are BFL bases. This one is definitely much more my colors. The other one is sort of more earthy colors and reds, but that's fine. Look, this is Jewel Tone Happiness, so whatever. That makes me happy for sure. Now but obviously I've thrown another variable into the experiment because those socks were knit top down heel flap construction. These socks are being knit toe up with some crazy experimental construction, but hopefully I get a pretty good idea of what's going on. And I think about where my socks normally dye. I don't think I have had skews dyed, but not because of where. So would it be? So it might just be actually like a good head-to-head comparison, because I think my other pair of skews is actually like a BFL nylon, my 80 stitch skews. Yeah, and I don't know whether or not the other ones are still in rotate. Like, my sock drawer has not been turned over particularly well lately. Like, I haven't been needing to leave the house with socks and shoes. I've been leaving the house with sandals. Or not leaving the house. But I had mostly with socks, mostly with sandals. But I just want to find out. But it'll be a couple more rows before I find out anyways, so there was no point in delaying the podcast to get to the graph, and then I would have had to get a little bit past, because what gets me fit-wise with making it go on is whatever, like getting sort of my heel bound up right before the little strap of the skew. So what would it be? And it's quite possible that there might be like yarn weight differences as well. So it may be the case where the beginning of the skein was a slightly different weight than the end of the skein. And that's why one sock was worse, because this was the second sock that I'm working on right. Whatever. This was the sock that I knit second at the time. But yeah, so I've been getting sort of bound up in this region. So having a little bit more room up here might be helpful in making it, but it'd be the case where this was sort of like a tight line. The other thing that got me was, so it'd be the case where there's a little bit of this, which is yarn that is not biased, and when I knit the improved sock, at least on my increased side of the sock, I ended up having it be super tight and close together. Or sorry, on the decrease side. And I figure having a little bit more of the conventional fabric would help. So when I started to work my decreases, I actually had it so that I had a buffer of 4 stitches that were unbiased and the decrease, in order to sort of give it a bit more elasticity and give. Because when I knit it, my increases ended up super close together and my decreases ended up super close together. And I figured that's only eating up the elasticity available, whatever, for stretchiness this way. And because I think this is maybe a little bit of a hard yarn, there wasn't as much elasticity in it, and the decreases seem to bind it up a lot more. So this one, the graft is super duper invisible. It accidentally turned out it was pretty much the same color, and I'm going to lose that for this one. But I think I'm actually going to have a pretty close yarn for the graft when I get to it on this other one, whereas before it stuck out because there was a lot of contrast. So I'm going to lose that on this one, but this one turned out to be a little bit more multicolored. So we'll just see what ends up happening. I think I did like a fractal split on it, but we had a nice long run of whatever the less cool colors here. And now when I hold this sock up to this sock is either about the same size or very slightly bigger, and that sort of thing. So once I get, probably what I'm going to do, my stop and assess point, is I'm going to run out of yarn that had already been a part of the sock. I'm going to put it on, I'm going to make sure things look right. After I get the heel checked, I'll put it on by my foot and compare it to this sock and be like, okay, are we running a little bit better now? Because this one, technically speaking, is 9 inches, which should be my foot length. But I think there's just something a little bit funny where this isn't really, or would it be? You might have 2 inches of depth on the bottom of the foot, but you don't have the same height on the top. And so that's where things maybe get a little bit wonky and strange on this. Oh, I haven't even moved in the end on this one. I think I knew it was slightly doomed. But I can get this one on my foot sometimes. I think the other demerit going for these socks at the time was, like, I finished them while I was pregnant, and I probably had some foot swelling going on, and so that did not help with the whole instep, the high instep thing, where there was just more foot to go in, basically. So, like, but it would be the case where it's nice that you don't have to be, like, struggling to get the sock on. It's definitely not trivial to get it on. Like, would it be? Like, it definitely, or would it be? Like, I ended up taking some pictures of it and posting them as a part of Instagram too, which basically boiled down to, yeah, no, this sock was a little bit too tight. And you can tell it pretty far down on my foot that it was a little bit too tight, but whatever. So, yeah, so you have to, like, start shimmying the leg up there. And I think that's maybe where my downfall was like my heel wouldn't even go past the leg, much less the tight little spot where the line of increases are, as you do. So let's see. But so I think it was the case where it was like, because I swear I put the sock on. I was like, well, okay, the sock goes on close enough. But maybe it does depend on the time of day and the moon and that sort of thing. Okay, so it goes on, but it's tight. The little, like, my ankle bone is here, and, like, all of the business is all the way down here. So that's where its downfall is just there need the bottom of the foot with more stitches so that these straps are a little bit higher, so it sits closer to where my ankle is, instead of how it is right now. And like would it be? I will wear these socks more if they're a little bit less annoying. Because how else am I going to tell if this crazy plying structure was a good idea? See, like, yeah, like this is just a little bit too much effort. So curious to see if it worked. So curious. I'll have to talk more, but hopefully sort of outlines all of the stuff going on. Like, what would it be? Like, if you don't have a high-end step, it's just going to work for you. If you do have a high-end step, you need to really deeply know what it is you need and interpret the directions. And obviously I'm pretty far off book at this point, where it's like, this is a free pattern, but I've modified it first so that it's 80 stitches instead of 72, and then applying another modification on top of that in order to move sort of the line from this point to this point. And that's executed by adding 6 stitches on the bottom of the foot, so you end up deciding what foot you're knitting much earlier on than the pattern calls for. But this point here is sort of fixed on this sock, so that one's sort of a fixed point in the sock, and then the hope is that this point here on the other side of the foot is still in a pretty good spot for you. But it does, like, it's not like totally straight on the sock itself. And I don't know if that also maybe couples into maybe this whole enterprise is doomed. Because since the yarn is very energetic, like the moment it hits water, is it just going to twist and be like, yeah, maybe a bias knit thing was a bad choice for this. Would have been smarter to just have a normal tube. So it's quite possible that I might end up re-knitting. What would it be? I think I did the now and next socks with the first experimental yarn. So if this fails, I'm knitting a pair of top pin socks. But that is an awful lot of effort in order to get that point. But that's sort of where my brain is at the moment. It's like this yarn looks so good as this. The process of knitting it has been lovely, so that's a positive. Yeah, basically, or would it be the process has been lovely. I knit whatever, roughly half of a sock this week, ripped it out, and then have almost recovered, or knit probably more than half a sock this week. So it is not something where whatever the process is unpleasant. It's not that I'm particularly angry about it. It's more in like a troubleshooting, problem solving mode. So, and that's apparently what I need in my life right now. Is a little bit of, or I guess the best way to describe it is getting some satisfaction out of the puzzle and understanding why and doing the thing in order to fix it is where I'm at right now. And this is satisfying that desire. Would it be the case where sometimes it's nice to have some tight gauge, small, compact knitting on you, so definitely much less bulk carrying around, because I get a decent amount of knitting time during the day on my walk. So that is where a lot of this progress is being made. Just to give a super brief spinning update, I didn't do any spinning this week. This week has been for apparently knitting and knitting with handspun, and I will get back to it when I get back to it. But what would it be? I think I'm deeply curious about if I've solved my problem. So that meant that I could not spend time spinning because I needed to find out had I actually solved my problem. Which is probably also explains why I haven't swatched, because I want to know if I've hit upon the answer and figured out how to make this work for me. But what was it? I think someone had mentioned last night, it was like the TNT, where you've done something several times and you know it's just going to work, and that oftentimes it's mentioned in the context of sewing patterns. Like, I've knit the skews many times, but it is not a tried and true. It is a mess around and find out what works sort of situation. Would it be? I've knit with variegated yarn twice, self-striping yarn twice, and effectively hand-spun twice. But despite that, that's still the case where, whatever, there's the brain candy of figuring out how to make it work, but I have not yet hit upon the, or would it be? It isn't tried and true at this point. I'm still figuring out what tried and true is on it, and it's sort of like you just keep coming back because it's so interesting, not necessarily because it's guaranteed to work. Oh well, it is interesting. So that would be there will be time for spinning, at least for now, is knitting with my hand spun, which is positive. And perhaps because of this experience, I need to make sure I figure out what, whatever, it'd be the case where I guess I'm in a place in my life now where we're having a little bit of a brain candy thinking knitting is actually what I want, or getting 2 projects on the needles might also be that sort of thing where I have a simpler thing that I can take with me on walks, and then simpler being a relative term. It could be pretty darn complicated. And having something that is requires a little bit more of my mind, would be because I'm not getting it for my work. Whatever, some of that puzzling, problem solving, sort of thing. So I'll just have to think about that. Maybe that means I also wind yarn for the lace shawl. We shall see. It seems possible. But first I need to finish fixing these socks so I can wear them. So close. So close. So that's the story this week. It's been fun. It will continue to be fun, at least for a little bit longer. Hopefully we'll be able to have some good outside time today, but whatever. We may run out the clock on the day too. Who knows? Not too worried about it. Life continues on. So, with that, I hope you guys have a lovely week, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. So, take care, guys. Bye-bye.